Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Nathan Agan. I am the host and producer of The Working Actor's Journey, and I'm very excited to be doing another live episode. And today's guest is Geoffrey Wade. Hi, Geoffrey.
Hello.
I've known Geoffrey for a number of years. I've known him as an actor, as a teacher, and not directly as a director, but he has been involved in working on a number of the scenes we've been doing in the workshops, the online workshops, over the last year and a half. Been doing a lot of great work there and on King Lear and Richard III and As You Like It. So just been really fun. As kind of the theme here, Geoffrey is also a working actor. You're just a few weeks away from returning to rehearsals. Where are you headed in just a little bit?
I'm going to San Francisco. I'm in the San Francisco production of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. We actually start rehearsals again on the 29th of November and reopen in mid-January. So it's going to be for that show, a pretty quick turnaround.
Fantastic. Well, great. I'm thrilled that we could find a little bit of time for Geoffrey to talk about the character of Dogberry in Much Ado, and of course, there's a lot of other things we can get into. But it occurred to me that just like with the scenes, it might be fun to really dive deep on just one character, one role. And so I thought this might be a good way to just kind of unpack and explore one particular character. And Geoffrey had mentioned he'd played this part actually a couple times. So really excited we can chat about this. I can see, some people watching live, which is great. If you want to leave some questions or comments, I will do my best to monitor those. And if there's any comments or questions, I'll bring that in. But great. So what I wanted to do is just kind of get right into it. So Geoffrey, can you give us a little bit of context in terms of when and where you played the role of Dogberry?
Sure. I played Dogberry in, I believe it was 1972, when I was at Amherst College. We played it there, and then at the Folger Theater in Washington, because Amherst and the Folger are, I don't know, I believe Amherst is a trustee of the theater, or of the Folger Library, so we got to use their theater.
Oh, okay,
so
cool.
We did it that way. It was a terrific production. So that Amherst College, 72, Much Ado About Nothing. It was a really terrific production, if I do say so myself. We had a firecracker pair of Beatrice and Benedict. One was a woman named Elaine Bromka, who's still a working actress. And Bob Murphy was Benedict, a brilliant comedian and terrific actor who still does things occasionally, but has another main job in life. Mm-hmm. It was directed by Walter Boughton, who was the head of the theater department there, and I got to play Dogberry and had a great time doing it. But I learned a number of lessons. I was a young actor, obviously, I was 21 or 2 at that point, and I was in the course of learning things, but this one taught me a lot. The second time around was, I think, 1989 at the Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park. We did a production. I'm going to say some disparaging things. I'm not going to say his name, also I can't entirely remember it. The director was a guy who had been who was the head of the drama department at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and it was a good production. Amelia White, my wife, was, and Victor Talmadge were the lead roles. Mm-hmm. Hero is played by a woman whose name has just gone right out of my head, but she's gone on to quite a successful career, as have all those people as working actors. So it was obviously a professional production, and it had its good points and bad points. but I actually had more fun the first time around.
Oh, interesting. So, looking at that production in college, when you were cast in the role, like, did you have anything in your head going into rehearsals of, who this guy is, or what your role was or job was? Did you have any notions of going into it, or were you just totally open?
Well, I was totally open in the sense that I didn't have any preconceived. I'd never seen. I don't think I'd even ever seen Much Ado About Nothing in any form on stage, or I'm not sure there even was a movie of it by then. I don't think I'd read the whole play before it came up in that case. I'd heard of Beatrice and Benedict and was aware of their kind of this firecracker, great, one of the great couples of dramatic literature, comedic literature. So I was vaguely aware of them. I don't think I even knew that Dogberry existed. When I read it, I thought, well, that's the role for me. I'm not gonna. But Bob Murphy was. I happened to be at Amherst at a really great time, because there were a number of really terrific young actors at the various schools at that time. That being Amherst, Smith, and Mount Holyoke. And each of those was a single-sex school at the time. Smith and Mount Holyoke still are. So there was a great deal of I was going to say intercourse, but I really mean the word is
interplay, or
interplay. That's the word. Fair amount of the other too, but there was a certain amount of interplay between the schools, and there were a group of us who just happened to be in a group of really good actors, frankly, at that time. It was a phenomenon that I heard about from the professors there, the people who were teaching us. They said this is a thing that kind of happens, sort of waves of interested, competent young people come through. So I had no preconceived notion of Dogberry at all until I read it. In the reading of it, he's clearly this great sort of comic character. He's sort of the head of the low comedy section of the play, if you will, which is great because the high comedy is extremely high.
Right.
The wordplay and the sophistication of it, and Dogberry is about as far as you get on the other side. It's a comic mishmash of language. It's this balance. It's the opposite, and there are great opportunities for physical humor, the slapstick humor. Really, the opposite of the sophisticated, smooth, graceful, very witty, clever people you're getting earlier. And he and his band don't show up until well into the play, and structurally they sort of help to re-energize the comedy, because by the time they show up, things are getting a little dark, to say the least. And their greatest comic scene comes after one of the greatest dramatic scenes in the play, where things, we're talking about stabbing people in the marketplace and eating his heart and stuff like that.
Well, so thinking about the rehearsal process when you were in college, I think part of the reason we talked about discussing this character was it sounded like you had, or some things maybe had kind of become clear to you, or had some just insights through that rehearsal process. And so what did you discover about the character?
Well, the thing is, when you read it, and when the director or people start saying, "Oh my God, Dogberry, that's a hilarious part. It's one of the great comic parts of." And I was thinking, but I'd never heard of it. But it's a great comic part in all of Shakespeare. So you think, well, I have this obligation to be funny, and it's written funny. I mean, the words are funny.
Yeah.
He uses, for those of you who don't know, I suspect everybody does, he uses these malapropisms. He gets words that kind of sound right but are wrong and often mean the opposite of what he's trying to say. So it seems like he should be funny.
Right.
Walter Broughton, the director, he was great at making stage pictures, and he was somewhat helpful in character development, but he was not a great acting coach, frankly.
Sure.
And I began to find myself in rehearsal thinking, this isn't funny. What I'm doing isn't funny. I don't know what made me say that. We weren't in front of an audience. This was well before we were in front of an audience. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel funny. And I went to someone for help, which is, a good thing to do when you're not getting it from the director. Sometimes you need to go to a friend or whatever. And I went to this guy who I do remember. His name is John Huberth. He's still with us. He may even be on Facebook. John was a couple of years ahead of me at Amherst. A hilarious actor, very good actor, and a director. And I said, I don't get it. This isn't funny. I'm not being funny. What's the problem? And what he basically helped me understand was that I was trying to be funny instead of playing a character. Now, this is an old trope. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows the story about the Luntz and, asking for a cup of tea and all that kind of thing. But this was my experience of actually learning it, in the field, as it were. And I don't think I'd ever heard those other stories also. I mean, again, I was quite young. And John, I can remember where this happened. It was in Valentine Hall, which was our actually there was a place where we had a dining hall in Amherst called Valentine, which was much despised for the quality of food it served. But then there was a little cafe where you could buy food, in off hours. And that's where we had this chat over what I believe was called a truck burger in those days, a hamburger with a fried egg on it. It was very good.
Oh, okay.
And coffee probably. And his sort of taking me through what the character wanted rather than how to execute this joke. What's the timing on this joke? Where should I take a pause? All that stuff, which has its place. I'm not saying it doesn't, because it does. And I'm a firm believer that, and I know this empirically, that, taking a pause in the right place and emphasizing the right word can make a joke work, and doing it wrong can kill it, obviously. But that was my approach. I kept thinking, this guy's supposed to be funny. How do I make him funny? And basically what John was helping me with was, how do you make him true? If you can make him true, he will be funny. We will perceive him as funny. But this is not a character who tells jokes. This is not a Benedict who knows how clever he is.
Right.
Who knows the verbal fireworks he's setting off, or the little tumbling acts he's doing, taking something that Beatrice says and he turns the word around, or inverts it, or uses it. That's a man who knows he's funny and uses it. It's his charm, it's his weapon, it's all kinds of things. So when that drops away in that incredible, fantastic scene between the two of them, where she tells him to kill Claudio. Right. The only way, they declare their love for each other. I mean, it's an unbelievable scene. It's a love scene. And then she immediately says, I want you to kill your best friend. Yeah. Not I want you to, you have to kill him if you love me. Yeah. So Benedict is a man who knows that, Dogberry, again, is the exact opposite. He is a man who is so sure of his probity, of that what he is saying is correct, that we find the humor in it. He doesn't see the humor. He wouldn't see what's funny about it. Every time somebody tries to make a little joke at his expense, when he's talking to Leonato, I'd have to look up the exact line, but Dogberry says something that's sort of, he says, I would, if I were as rich as a king, I would give all my tediousness to you. Like, he thinks tediousness is all his riches, right? And Leonardo says, all your tediousness? And he goes, yeah. And I'd go borrow somebody else's to give you even more. He doesn't even realize when he's slightly being made fun of, which is the fun of it. But I didn't quite, at that age, I didn't quite realize that. So John sort of took me through the character, because I was looking at it from the outside. I was saying this guy is pompous and he's self-satisfied and thinks he knows everything. And John just sort of simply started saying, well, why? Why is he that? And with each answer I'd give, he'd just continue to ask, why? Why is that? Why? And it was a very simple kind of exercise, which I've used with students and actors since. It just helps you get below the surface, get below even your first impulse. Why is he pompous? Well, he wants to assert his power. Okay, well, why does he want to do that? Because he doesn't think he's as good as these people. Well, why is that? Because he grew up in the poorest part of Messina.
Sure.
And so you begin to construct a life for this person, and as with all characters, you're not conscious of your needs, or what's made you be this way. You don't you don't have a fight with your partner and think, oh, that's because my mother didn't love me enough or something. It's because you're mad at her. Then these things accrete over time. Right. But it's useful to have some kind of touchstone for a character. Something you can go back to that sort of gets at the nerve of things, at the nub of things, rather than trying to be funny. Right. Why is it so important for him to always be right, to assert himself the way he does, to put verges down gently, but to never let verges get, above him or speak ahead of him?
Well, and I think, sorry to jump in there, Geoffrey, but it sounds like, what we're kind of getting at is, I think the way I heard it is that, every character in the play to themselves thinks they're the lead. Like this is Dogberry's story. Like this is, he's the most important character in the play to him. Of course. And I love the point that you brought up of like, the why digging, because, it's like, even for myself, the more introspection one can have, it's like, I can probably tie about 90% or more of every action I do in the day to certain things that, occurred to me when I was a kid, and it's just like, they're just such deep seated things that they just influence a lot of my actions and behaviors. Now, some of those are, the world might see as positive or as, or on the other side, destructive or whatever, but it's all baked in there. So, and we all have that. We all have those motivations going through us. It's like you said, whether it's our mother or father or other situations, it's like, it's coursing through us in whatever events come up. We may not be conscious in the moment of, oh, I'm going to eat this because my dad when I was 4 years old, told me this thing, but it's all there. And as you were just saying, there's no particular value on it.
That's
Right.
just the way it was.
Right.
Any value that's put on it is after the fact and sort of immaterial.
Right.
That's other people's judgments.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of characters, especially in Shakespeare, but certainly in other plays that can seem, eccentric or bizarre or larger than life. I mean, we can easily pick Falstaff or whatever these characters. And this idea of, it's like, okay, but I can't play eccentric. I can't play bizarre. Like there's no action for that. So what I'm enjoying is hearing about, and this is, I think, what we're getting at. It's like, well, how do you ground this character in reality? Like what is his reality? And it's a cliche thing because it's true. The more real a situation is to somebody, the more likely we're going to find it funny, just because of the circumstances.
Yeah.
Because like the more serious it is to that person and the more they are committed 100% to the success of it or not, it just becomes funnier because of the ridiculousness of the situation or whatever. Our expectations are thwarted, because of their response and all that kind of stuff. Well, no, and I'm really enjoying this, and I don't want to give short shrift to the production later that you did. So yeah. I just wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit, because I think, this was about 25 years later that you
I guess 72, 82, 92. No, it was
about 20 years later.
20 years later.
Okay. So and I think every time you return to a part, obviously you're going to look at it differently. You're going to be in a different place in your own life. You're going to be experiencing different things and all that. So how did you feel like you were approaching the character any differently the second time around, or you were seeing different things, or things were landing with you differently?
I don't recall taking a sort of different tack on the character, the way you might with a more complex, particularly a tragic character. Again, comedy is demanding. What was different, interestingly, that time around was I felt, even though I'd sort of gone outside the production at Amherst to sort of to get a hook onto the character, in Cincinnati, somehow, for some reason, I felt a little bit more on my own, believe it or not. It's weird because, I thought that my basic approach to Dogberry was the same. You have different people around you, particularly your Verges. That's right. That's the two of you, and we had a good relationship. We had a very good relationship, which is good because you're doing that sort of comedy stuff where you're, I don't know, carrying a ladder or something and turning around, and the other guy ducks. It's that kind of stuff. Right. You want to have a good relationship that way, in particular with Verges. But because the director, I've forgotten if I told you this or I've told everyone, the director was very much of an academic. Okay. And he knew everything about the Elizabethan time. He knew things about Shakespeare. He was the one who would make comments about, the structural importance of Dogberry in this, their scenes coming, comic relief, sort of helping us come back into the comedy world.
Yeah. Geoffrey, play the rising action.
Yes, things like that. But it was a little bit of a difficult set to work on. Cincinnati has an inherent problem. It's one of those big thrust stages that were so popular in the mid 20th century that people thought a big thrust stage would bring you closer to the audience. But of course, at any given moment, half the audience is behind you. It's
right.
They're kind of difficult to work on.
Oh, sure.
And we had a set that compounded the difficulty. So it was hard to, the director's job would to keep you open and to keep the focus in the right place and all that kind of stuff that the outside eye has to do, that he wasn't very good at, unfortunately. And I remember spending a lot of time just on the sort of mechanics that time around. And I was extremely grateful that that I'd had the previous experience with Dogberry, because what Dogberry wants, and the humor that I found in my take on Dogberry, that had a firm base. And this time we had to do a lot of work to keep literally keep ourselves open, to keep the action where most of the audience could see it most of the time. All these things that are tricky enough on any stage. They're compounded on these thrust stages, I believe. And so in some ways it was a more difficult production, but having the character basis already set helped a lot. It also taught me that time that there are times you really have to sort of protect yourself from a director, not in a I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do it your way, I take a different interpretation.
Right.
But sometimes you have to solve problems yourself. So Burgess and I would, we'd experiment. I recall this, sort of going off on our own and figuring things out and then presenting it. And again, that's something that has to be, what's the word I want?
Well, you definitely need to be diplomatic about it.
Diplomatic is yes. One does need to be diplomatic. I remember. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Geoffrey. No, and it was good. It was funny. There can be a problem with that if you have a successful first time through and you're going to do it again, do something again, and it's different set, different people. Everything is different. Excuse me.
Yeah, well,
and you remember some of your best bits. I had some bits in the Amherst production that a friend of mine who I met up with a few years ago, he said, one of the funniest things I've ever seen on stage, he said, was that move you did in Much Ado, when you went to lean on the sexton's desk and it wasn't there and you just fell straight over. He said, that was so funny. And it was funny. It was very funny. It got a big laugh. Well, there's no way to recreate that in the Cincinnati production.
Right.
So there are things that you miss.
Yeah.
Things like
that.
No,
I can relate to the point about, needing to figure it out for yourself. There was a production I did, and I was playing one of the two leads, and we actually had co-directors on the production, but me and the other actor kind of quickly learned that one of the directors was very clown focused, comedy focused, and the other was very fight choreography focused. And so that kind of left a big gap for, what about the story? Who's telling the story? So the fight scenes were great. The clowns were pretty good. And it's like, I think you and I have to figure out what we're doing here. And yes, we'd often go block scenes and then be like, we were thinking about this. And then they'd be like, yeah, that works. And I was like, okay, good. But yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I think it's helpful even for me to hear that, that may never go away. You could be on the biggest film set in the world and the director still isn't giving you anything. And it's like, yeah, you have to come up with this.
Yeah. And everything is different. As the stuff I've directed, if an actor has a solution that works, I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
Many directors are not interested in hearing about that at all. It's like, do it my way.
I know.
Which is great. That's also great. If it's working, it's fine.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up a couple more questions about the character. I mean, were there ever times, and I don't know, maybe it was beyond this character, but that you ever felt nervous really going for it, or like, trusting the script and yourself, like even when had kind of figured out maybe the person Dogberry was, or and really committing to something? Like, did you, yeah, how do you build up that confidence for yourself, or do you still have those moments of self-doubt, or how does that work?
Uh,
And maybe it more applies to other characters, that you've played.
Well, no, I do like to go big. I remember the late Jeannie Hackett, God rest her soul, talking about Shakespeare, would say you have to, and she may have got it from somebody else, but that's where I learned it. She said you have to rise to the language, right? You can't pull the language. Talking about Shakespeare, you can't pull the language down. In the Greeks,
right? Yeah.
The challenge is to rise to the language. And believe it or not, you have to rise to you have to rise to Dogberry's language and to his self-assurance, and to his it reads as pomposity, but that's a judgment from the outside. To him, he's a person who's confident and knows what he's doing,
right,
and doesn't admit to mistakes. In that early scene, someone says, well, what do we do if we see somebody doing something wrong? And he said, well, you should just let him go about it, because that way you won't be disturbing the peace by arresting him. Just he's got an answer for everything. So that's, in my mind, and also it's more fun this way, that gives you a character to rise to. So when you get the slapstick moments like that, leaning on the desk that isn't there, right, taking a huge pratfall, or I think I actually did, this is so corny, but the stage at Amherst was an old-fashioned pine floor with a stage cover on it. It was an old-fashioned stage. It was great, but you could, and we set this, although it was in the 20s, set in the sort of Messina in the 20s, and kind of Italian. My character had this sword that he carried around, which again, gives you great opportunities for banging it into things. And I literally did one of those things where I stuck it into the stage and the point stuck, and then I walked away and it pulled me back. Those are big, goofy, stupid things that, if you haven't shied away from the character, seems to me you can, I don't want to say get away with, you can execute.
Right.
And they'll be funny. You have to embrace the bigness of the character. Is that, did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, I believe you did.
Go off.
I did want to touch just briefly on, and you may have a simple answer for it, but your thoughts on prose, because some say it's the language of the clowns or the uneducated, and I've read others that have felt like, well, its characters are using it to hide something or play at something, whereas verse, or like the genuine thoughts and feelings. And so I was just curious, where do you come down on prose, and how do you approach it? Do you have anything particular?
I don't. Character, the same character will speak in prose and verse.
Yeah.
Sometimes almost within the same speech, but certainly within the same scene.
Yep.
You can have a two-hander scene and people will pop in and out, but you'll find them both there. So this is an interesting question. I'm a little inarticulate in it.
Well, it's okay. I know I kind of, it's a
does
deeper
seem to
question.
be,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a deeper question, and it
Sometimes it opens a door.
Amelia, my
Yeah.
wife,
Yes.
just said, who's overhearing this, said sometimes it opens a door, and that's a extremely good way of putting it. I mean, it can open a door either way.
Mhm.
If your thought is organized and precise, it might lead you to, or it has a rhetorical need to
Right.
be more beautiful, smoother,
Right.
clearer. That might take you to verse, but yeah, prose can be more direct, and it tends to be the language of characters who aren't as sophisticated, but certainly very sophisticated characters. Can't get more sophisticated than Hamlet, or
Sure.
Measure for Measure. It's all over the place.
Right. Right.
I think you have to, as with the verse itself, you have to sort of take it for what it is, as it's there. See if you can figure out why the character in that moment has moved from one to the other.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think what you were saying earlier about, really grounding the character, because I think it's, there's certainly, you can go the academic route and read what everybody says about what verse means and prose means and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately you have to dig into it and go, okay, well, right, but what is this character trying to communicate, and what do they want right now?
And it's it's certainly good to read and then come to a decision. I mean, I'm very leery of in all of drama, but certainly Shakespeare, when someone says always or never, you should probably not listen to the next thing that she or he has to say. Shakespeare's just too clever for that, particularly as he gets in the more mature plays.
Yeah.
It's just really hard to make these hard and fast rules.
Yeah. Well, I know we were talking before we started here about this little bit of text that Dogberry has later in the play, and he ends the scene with this, and so we don't have to kind of break it down word by word, but it's a speech that starts with "Dost thou not suspect my place?" And he talks about because. Is it Conrad had just called him an ass or something like that?
Yes, it's Conrad.
Yeah, and so now, and he kind of almost in like a bit of verbal wordplay, but in a self-inflicting way, he picks that up and continues to call himself an ass, and it's obviously very funny just to read on the page, but and you said something I thought was really great. It kind of encapsulated this. Because I have thoughts of like, okay, is he confused or what like how does an actor kind of get through this? And I think it probably highlights a lot of things we've been talking about. But yeah, what could you share in terms of just some ideas or insights on that particular speech?
Well, it's again, it's a kind of I'm trying to use a different word, but it's kind of a touchstone for the whole character. I mean, he's at his most outraged, his most his sort of highest emotional pitch, I think, in this. And he's telling the truth, and he's sort of exposing what's important to him about his life and himself as a character. Now he uses the wrong words, which is funny.
Right.
He says, I have to look at it because I can't remember it. Dost thou not suspect my place? Dost thou not suspect my years? And of course, he doesn't mean suspect, he means respect. That's a continuous thing for Dogberry. He uses big words in wrong ways. This is a comedic trope that probably started long before Shakespeare, and you'll see in buddy movies today.
Right.
It's just a funny thing when people who aren't quite as smart as they think they are using big words to sort of signal to other people how intelligent they are.
Right.
I mean, you hear it all the time, and sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's a little kind of pathetic or sad, but it's a very common thing. We hear it all the time. I hear it in just everyday speech when people misuse pronouns, for example. People are constantly trying to sound more intelligent than they are, and as a result, they use the wrong word, or they use the slightly wrong word, and it only makes them sound stupider. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible. The grammar police. It's just awful.
So in this,
people talk about, let's say, I can't think of it, but it's misuse of me and I, for example. People want to use I because they think that makes them classier, whereas the correct word to use is me, right? That's the one we hear every day, and it drives me insane.
So all right, so
this is all I'm saying is his misuse is an exaggerated thing of a real thing that we all do all the time anyway. We try to use big words to make ourselves sound and to sound smarter than we are.
Yeah.
And the passion with which he delivers this speech is also what makes it funny. Well, I mean, I just think he is completely off the charts.
And so, I mean, why is it so important that everybody remembers that he's an ass? What is that something he's confused, where he's trying to sound smarter, or because he makes a point over and over again of remember that I'm an ass.
Yeah. It's just a little it makes perfect sense. He's just got a little grammar problem.
Okay.
Make sure you write down that I've been libeled, right? That's what he's saying.
Got it.
I want it recorded. And if he doesn't write it down, I want you all you guys to remember, you were here, I was libeled, or I was slandered, whatever.
Yep. Sure. Yeah.
Right. I was slandered by this person, and I want it recorded because I'm an officer of the town. You can't say that to me.
Right.
Because when you do that, it diminishes my, this counter, get the fuck away from me, or sorry, just get your hands off me, because you can't say that to me. I'm the constable of the town.
Right.
It's the comic version of the horrible things we see when a cop says, if you touch me, you get shot. That kind of thing.
Well,
I have to maintain my authority.
Right. And
he just constructs it wrong. He says,
right.
What he's saying is, remember that guy said I'm an ass.
Right.
That's what he's saying.
And it's interesting, because if you replace the malapropisms and you use the word slandered, or whatever Shakespeare would have used apropos for the day, suddenly it takes on like a much more serious tone, because
it is.
Right, exactly, right.
And that's the key. And
it cuts right to like, no, this is like, anyone could see, well, yes, of course, this man is, he's a man of the law, and he is arguing for something that is true and just and right. But then the comedy is that, like, oh God, he's just like, he's baffling this at every turn. Okay. So no, that's really fascinating.
That's the thing. And it's not a little thing.
No.
He's achieved a position, whether rightly or wrong, however, whatever the backstory you want to make is.
Right.
But he is not born into this position.
Right.
Like Benedict and Don John and Leonardo, all these rich bastards.
Right.
Who are screwing everything up. This Dogberry is, however he got this position,
Right.
he feels he has earned it, and he takes it very seriously. And any diminishment of it diminishes him as that's his identity. That's
Oh,
what
sure.
he is.
Yeah. I mean, I think
He doesn't have the resources of the wealthy or the well-born,
right.
who have inherited their position, who have inherited their sort of essence.
Yeah. And I think that's a very common or very relatable experience that you know, if someone feels less than, then they're constantly, you know, or subconsciously making attempts to kind of validate or prove themselves. And so, you know, and so that could be why someone attempts to use larger words to sound smarter and all that kind of stuff. And leading into exactly what you just said, that any attack or threat of someone's own self-worth, you know, is a major assault, and that needs to be defended. So yeah,
and then he gives you this list,
right,
of the you know, it's about halfway through. He says you're going to get in trouble. You're going to be, and he says, "Thou art full of piety; shall be proved upon thee by good witness." Again, you know, he's using the wrong word, but because he's full of the opposite of piety. He's a villain. But then he says, "I'm a wise fellow, which is more an officer, and which is more a householder, and which is more as pretty a piece of flesh as any is in Messina." So, you know, he talks about his office. He talks about his wealth. He talks about his actual physical being, of which he's quite proud. I know I have a big mustache now, but again, when I did it, I had this big fake, you know, mustache. He was a guy, you know, he likes his uniform. He likes, he likes that whole look.
It almost,
and then he says, "I know the law." A rich fellow enough, a fellow who hath had losses and 2 gowns. Some people, you know, that people wonder what does "I've had losses" mean. I think I always took it to mean he's had enough money or wealth or possessions that he has been able to lose but still come back, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I hadn't thought about this before, but you know, again, if we really try to get at what is this character attempting to communicate, you know, I started to think about Shylock, and I started to think about Angelo. You know, that like if again you corrected the grammar in this speech, you could hear somebody like Angelo saying these same lines.
Yeah.
And it could take on a much darker, sinister tone. And again, like you look at a character like Shylock, who in many ways in the play is defending who he is and needs to because of the society. You know, that's the same, you know, and we never, like, we don't laugh at Shylock, you know, at his at what he's trying to talk about. It's like, no, it's deeply serious to the character. And so it's just interesting that there are those kind of themes or whatever. But yeah, I never thought about the character or connected it that way to some of the other characters in the canon.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a person defining himself right in front of you.
Yeah.
And that's why I say that, you know, this little speech is sort of the key, is kind of a key to the whole character.
Right. And
we don't say every day, you know, "You can't talk to me like that. I went to college. I've got a master's. I earn 75 grand a year. You can't talk to me that." Some people do.
Yes.
And we think they're assholes. But that all those things, you know, this is a guy who he's defining himself,
right,
literally, both he says he's wise, he has wealth, and he looks good.
Yeah.
I mean, it covers every aspect of his of his persona, of his being.
Right.
And it's like he's holding. I sometimes think of it as, defining yourself that way. It's like holding something out. It's like building a kind of wall. It's like
right, the billboard.
defining
It's
yourself.
like
It
yeah,
literally
exactly.
is defining yourself. This is what I am, and this character in this particular play gets a chance to explicitly state it.
Right.
We don't always in plays.
And I start to imagine like the other characters on stage, that it's like, if anyone is laughing at the buffoonery that they're witnessing, that would probably only anger him further, because it's like you can't, because at that point, like you said, he's so far gone that it's we probably wouldn't be able to appreciate that, oh, he said something funny, he said the wrong thing. It's you're continuing to try to erode my position here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it should be delivered with a level of, with the same commitment and passion that Shylock would defend.
Oh yeah, of course,
his own self.
Yeah,
and I just think it's an interesting thing.
Right. I mean,
I find it interesting when people try to define themselves. We've talked about this before, but I got to play Quixote in Man of La Mancha a couple of times, and there's this scene at the end where he's confronted with the Knight of the Mirrors, right?
Mm.
The knight comes and he's surrounded by mirrors, and they're showing him for what he really is, just a broken down old man with a messed up imagination. He's not a knight, he's nothing. And that character that's also a character who's defining himself constantly through the show. His very first song is I am Don Quixote, right? It's like Yahweh, I am myself, I am this person. And at the very end, he's still saying, this is who I am. It's not what you say I am. I've decided what I am. And he sort of goes down swinging.
Right.
I remember seeing a really interesting thing. I know we're getting way off this topic here, but I remember seeing this really interesting thing when we lived in New York once, of a young man being arrested in Times Square. And he was kind of he's the kind of kid who hung out in, there used to be a gaming arcade there.
Oh, okay.
He was that kind of a kid, kind of a street kid, whatever. And the police had him face down on the sidewalk around 42nd Street. And there were, 2 or 3 cops around him. And, all of us New Yorkers just walking around this.
Sure.
But I remember being sort of fascinated by the fact that he never stopped talking. This guy in handcuffs, he never stopped sort of defending himself or whatever he was saying.
Right.
And it wasn't just screaming at the cops or anything. He was just running this narrative. And I remember thinking and there were all these people around him, and I thought he's a person who is unto himself. He's building a sort of barrier, saying this sounds very highfalutin and pretentious, but it's as if he was defining himself by continuing to talk, by continuing to assert his self against these cops. Because I was thinking, well, if that were me, for whatever reason, I think I would go quiet, because I know that I would be able to call, a friend who would call a lawyer, and I have all these resources that would help me deal with this. But this young guy, his only resource was himself. So he had to sort of forcefully define himself. So I hope you cut that part out of this. That's a weird thing to say, but it's interesting, a character who is defining himself in the face of this kind of attack, this little pushback from Conway.
No, I think it's fascinating, and I mean, I do not pretend to, be really strong when it comes to characters or things like that. So I mean, this kind of stuff is really still super fascinating to me. And I think, I mean, again, like just the idea of, okay, imagine this is Shylock and play Shylock. Now, of course, you may eventually think about the story and the scene, and you're not, maybe you won't eventually be playing Shylock, but just as a start, I think that's really fascinating. And I'm not trying to suggest that's what you were saying. I know that that's what I'm putting on it, but just that level of seriousness for the character. It reminded me, like, I just love these ideas that you're able to kind of bring up and put forth, like in the workshops. You mentioned a number of times of, looking for those places where the speech could stop, and then the character decides to pick it up again. So I think, these are just great, and I want to honor your time. I mean, I know you have rehearsal coming up in a little bit, in a few weeks and all that, but I really appreciate that you've been able to talk and share so much about the character today, Geoffrey. It was really, really wonderful.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to revisit him.
Well, good, and
he's a wonderful guy, and again, that conversation with John, and then playing this character, it's a very memorable one in my life as an actor. I learned a lot. I learned a lot playing this guy. So it's nice to revisit him for a minute.
and I think it's an important lesson or idea that you're not alone. I think so many of us, especially when we're younger, assume we need to figure it all out, and like we need to come up with all the answers. And it's like, you can talk to people, you can ask people, like you can get other opinion, other people can help you out. You had a little consigliere on that production, so that's fine. I had one. Maybe I'm starting a tradition, but I have one final little batch of quick questions, kind of a lightning round I'm talking about, that I wanted to go through, and it's very simple. These are this or that questions. So basically, you're going to pick which one you like or which one you prefer, and you'll see in a second what we're doing. So all right, so we'll go into the lightning round right now. So first question, Geoffrey: sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
The mountains or the beach?
Mountains.
Salty or sweet?
Salty.
Sandwich or salad?
Can I get like a half a sandwich and I have sort of a Panera thing? Oh, Jesus. A sandwich.
Okay. Early riser or night owl?
Night owl.
Summer or winter?
Winter.
Spicy or mild?
I am the quintessential medium guy.
Okay.
I'll go with spicy. I'd probably rather have spicy than.
All right. Fruits or vegetables?
Fruits.
Okay. And this one could get very divisive in terms of gaining or losing you fans, but dogs or cats?
Dogs.
All right, cool. There we go. The lightning round, 10 questions, all done. You can breathe a sigh of relief.
Put a dog on a mountain with a sandwich in the winter.
There you go. Perfect.
Sounds cozy, doesn't it? That'd be good.
Yeah, not bad. It sounds like you could go up to Upper Canada or something like that. Just take your dog in the winter and you'd be happy. Well, great. Well,
as long as I have a sandwich.
Yes, exactly. I want to thank all the people that were tuning in live. I see Stephen Temperley. I hopefully I get your name right.
Stephen. Oh my God.
He said I played Conrad once and enjoying the discussion. So I guess.
Oh my God, I'm so flattered. So Stephen is a fantastic actor.
Well, I'm thrilled that
I'm gonna hook you up, Nathan, with a thing he just did.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, one man show that he wrote.
Oh, good.
Great
And
office.
So Stephen had the opportunity to kind of what is that, set the ball for Dogberry to spike at that
Yes.
in that scene. And
Yes.
then let's see, we have David Adamson saying, thanks for your take on Dogberry. I remember hooking on to his pride, his sense of propriety. So great, wonderful. No, I really appreciate
Oh, I'm so flattered. That's
everybody
wonderful.
tuning in and checking it out. So yeah, I think that's it. Geoffrey, you can just stay on the call here as I kind of wrap things up on Facebook. But again, I just want to thank everybody for attending, and I do have plans to do more of these. I will say there is a podcast full of episodes. Geoffrey has his own episode. You can listen and hear more about his life story, his characters. We go deeper on Quixote and some of the other parts you played, and just his career. And then I've been putting out audio versions of a lot of the workshops that Geoffrey has directed, so you can go listen to kind of the final weeks of each of those sessions. Really fascinating deep dives into many great scenes, and those are also on YouTube as well. You can see the full version there, so it's great. And let's see, we have a PK Smith saying thank you. Stephen says thank you to both of us. Wonderful, great. So yeah, all right. Well, we'll wrap it up here on Facebook, and again, we'll hope to do more of this soon, and hope you have a great day. And thanks for tuning in.
Bye.